And it wasn't Christine Lagarde only who was like mudslinging words all over the place. I mean, you had Dijsselbloem, the Dutch finance minister, and Varoufakis, Greece's finance minister as well. Are you prepping for a default right now?
No, I think they're actually going to come to some sort of, temporary or interim conclusion again, where they come to some deal to push this down 6 months. And I've got a lot of reasons for that.
Okay, but how? I mean, it seems like everything is the opposite of what you just described.
Well, the first thing is the IMF is talking tough, and yet if you look at what they actually do when someone goes into arrears for them, for the first thing they do is send a nasty note saying, reminding them of the importance of paying debt. It's not till 2 weeks later that she has to bring it to the board. It's a 6-month process. So unlike bankruptcy here or foreclosure, there's no one coming to repossess anything in Greece. So defaulting on the IMF is not that big of a deal, and I think it will scare them. And I think really the goal here is to take the debt out of the IMF's hands, the ECB's, stuff it all into the EFSF and the ESM, which are two pan-European lending entities, and let them renegotiate. I think everyone realizes how bad the situation is, that Greece can default, will default, and it's probably beneficial to Greece. So Merkel's out there trying to get a deal.
How could it not be a big deal if Greece defaults on the IMF? Yeah, okay, they might get some kind of month respite before they're officially in default, but no one's ever done that before.
Right, and I think that's part of the reason. When you look at this, as someone explained to me, it looked like it was a very British, it's not cricket to default on them. So there's really no teeth to any of their rules.
Because the idea is that there's no way that the IMF, and to that point, EU creditors can actually get their money back. Like they don't get, if Greece defaults, they don't get paid, period, end of story.
Right. They go through this long process of lawsuits. We're seeing, Argentina is 15 years later and people are still suing. So there's no easy way to get the money back. It keeps it in control of Greece. Greece is running a primary surplus, so almost all this money that they're currently asking for is just to go back to repay the lenders. So Greece can function, and they'll probably need some money, but I'm sure China, Russia, someone like that would love to step in and provide a little bit of money just to rub it into Europe.
So why hasn't all of this gone down yet? So your idea is that, look, so Greece actually has the upper hand. So a deal will get done because Europe actually needs it to get done. And if it doesn't, no biggie, they just go to Russia or China.
Right, and I think it'll take some time. And I think part of what's gone on is this government actually made they hired Lazard back in January. So I think they've been actually getting decent advice. But it took a long time for them to pull the data together. And everything about the Europeans seems to be very long on politics. So they're all big on politics. They're big on rhetoric. They're big on, almost self-righteous indignation at people. They're very weak often when it comes to facts and figures. And now that they're at the point that they're really looking at the facts and figures, everyone can see it's unsustainable for Greece. They will not be able to make their payments. They can't keep all their things, but they've let it come too late, so they're going to have to kick the can for 6 months to work out a real plan.
So do you think that all this is just posturing then, and they aren't that exasperated? They're just doing it so they can go back to their constituents and say, hey, we talk tough.
I think there's a lot of that they have to talk tough so they can come back and say they dragged it to the line, they worked so hard and they got as much as they possibly could. And, there was no surprise to me that today didn't have an announcement because it was the Finmans. So you never get a big deal when it's the finance ministers only. The big deals have to be when the leaders meet, and the leaders are going to do a summit. I think that comes to be the perfect time. They announce some temporary resolution.
So is this an actual opportunity then? I mean, where would be the place you'd want to invest money if you're optimistic?
I think you look at Europe. I think you look at European banks. They've been selling off a little bit on the back of this, so I like European banks. I like credit.
Do you like Greek banks?
That's probably a little bit sketchy, so I'd avoid that at this point. They're too small and it's very volatile. So I'd look at Spanish, Italian banks. I think that becomes an opportunity. And from there, too, the credit space, so high-yield bonds, a lot of the bonds that have sold off, I think will become attractive. People will rush into credit.
Peripheral debt, like a Spanish 10-year?
Spanish, and then there's some of the ETFs. There's one called IHYG, which is a European high yield. Or you can go into some of the high yield ETFs over here, HYG or JNK. So I think there's lots of opportunity. It's a risk-on trade when this happens. We'll see Treasuries sell off, so I think we want to be a bit careful in the Treasury space. But I would go with a risk-on, and we'll see a little bit more follow-through from today.
So much more optimistic. The mudslinging could continue, but eventually a deal will happen. Peter, great to get your perspective. Thank you so much. Peter Tchir of Brean Capital.